the heart here and where we started from. So which is the preamble of the work that we are now presenting to you, a long work that we have done in this month, in this year, I would say. What motivated us to organize this symposium? When we started to discuss on that, it was, let's say, almost before the pandemic period. So the project started in 2020, as I said, just before that everything in the pandemic year happened. And it was under the intuition and the suggestion come from Professor Flaviano Celaschi, which introduced in his research activities a discussion which was intending to place the body in the center of the design process, which is not a trivial question. It's a very relevant question and relevant research path, as by the way, Andreas has started to introduce. The themes, of course, as you know, behind to the user-centered design, debate and approach. But as the UCD becomes a kind of an archetype of our design activities, of the activities which intended to, let's say, design next to the user technologies, the topic of the body, it happens to be sometimes, let's say, marginal or not in the center of the debate. Thanks to a recent book that Flaviano Celaschi has wrote, and is titled Human Body Design in the Transformative Economy, we have had a chance to see how actually the role of the body is relevant in the transformation of many products, of many services, and of course of many technologies, and how this element is going to become a center for the individual and the center for the designer. So that's the rationale behind our approach, and that's the intention that we have in identify within this symposium the role of the body in the interaction technologies.
The result is a project that led us to build a network of researchers, designers, and companies. The final aim is to build an observatory for activating a research process that investigates which implication of this newfound centrality of the body bring to the physical and virtual interaction process. In addition, a long-term objective will be to be a contribute with a new design-driven process to arise a collaboration from our territories with industries and universities. Before continuing, I give you some information about this growing network. After an initial request to take part to the project, we received a response from 44 people, both from academia, from profession, and from 7 different countries. We propose more or less 60 different case studies to analysis. A further work by our other research team has integrated this report to arrive to collection our database about 300 projects and 400 people in the 200 companies involved in this case study. From an initial analysis of the result, some considerations emerge. We started from 3 macro areas, homo faber, salubar, and cogitans, that open a research on the themes of a tool for men, for health, for prediction process. A vision emerges and describes many projects ready for spread in the market. On the slide, you can see this case study on the placed on the left of the screen along the axis that divide the well-being area and the homo faber area. On the right, you can see the case study linked to the use of the data, but the integration between data and physical things is growing in many projects, but it's a preliminary stage of evolution, and often and in many cases are the prototype of possible products. In the word graph, we can see the evidence that the axis on the left, there is a complexity that shows specific areas of innovation of a product already in the market. Instead, in the right area, there is many experiments in progress that presage a growth of new product and service.
So having said that, I mean, we get from the first results, at least from the analysis of the senses that are involved in this, let's say, technologies investigation, interaction technologies investigation. So the cases that we have studied and the cases that we are going to present today have display a wide range of different solutions in the interaction, but of course has take care of different senses among the others. And so the first very, let's say, relevant results, which has to be highlighted quite significantly, is that, of course, the greater importance that we have in the sense around the description and the promotion of the body is the visual channel. So the visual channel in our analysis is one of the most utilized and promoted senses, but not just a visual, not just alone, but together with others, which make more concrete and, let's say, more physical, even in a digital environment, the perception and the experience of the body. So what we are seeing today in this research as, of course, as in the major role of the visual, a big relation, a big role of what is the most important senses among the others that we have. But from the other, we have some, let's say, revelation about the relationship between this sense and the other. For instance, we have seen, and you are going to see, very important role played by the tactile and even more the active tactile, so the haptic experience. Haptic is a very crucial research area in the domain of the interaction because it makes the feeling of touching something, even you don't have something in front of you or together with you, or to perceive to be, you know, part of the, let's say, sensomotorial experience. So haptic is one of the senses that have been explored and promoted in most of our, or in many of our projects and in some of the ones presented today. And they are very relevant, for instance, when they play a role in the multitasking activities, as we have seen, together with another sense, which is not so much, let's say, investigated in the presented research today, but it's, you know, in a way relevant, which is the vocal and the acoustic. So we have haptic, we have vocal and acoustic, but we have also a kind of promising missing, let's say. For instance, the olfactory sense, which is, by the way, very important in the world, you know, during and after the pandemic. It seems to be something that the research are not investigating so much. And this is a kind of challenge for the future, combining this element with the other, because the missing of the olfactory and the improvement via interactive technology of the olfactory could make, let's say, people more aware about what happened, especially if something happened in their experience because of the COVID. And by the way, this has been recalled in many quotations in the human factors domain, even recently.
To understand how activate the anticipation process that help us to understand the complexity emerged after this phase of analysis, we have tried to highlight 7 study themes. The first is related to the relationship between the machine and the body, and how the artificial intelligence is used to improve the process of interaction of digital system with the humans. The second is related to the same concept, but in the complex sphere of the emotional recognition. The third and the fourth themes are linked to interaction with the physical and virtual artifact. The new tools and material can open up a new comprehensive interaction between the physical artifact and the digital dimension. The fifth theme is related to the absence of a body in social and learning relation. The COVID-19 give to this field of research an exponential growth in the direction of virtualization. The two last fields of research are mainly linked to well-being area and are related to the process of behavior change triggered by assisted technology intersect with the prosthetic element and wearable device. The last theme is focused on the sensory transduction, where there is a lack on the one sense. This is shifted via technology on the other ones. This is not a new design direction, but now is moving from the prototype level to the product dimension. In summary, this 7th field of research tell about a complex scenario where the experiment that were prototypes at the beginning of the century now are becoming concrete B2B and B2C product. The first theme we highlight in this symposium show two scenarios of the human-machine relationship are emerging in the interaction project. From a model in which the human control the machine through the thin lines of the action and the reaction that constitute a traditional idea of interface, we are moving on an inverse model in which the machine learns from the human. The setup of neural networks capable to interpreting human movement increasingly in precise manner is gradually becoming a stable reality that can be implemented in the design process. Low-cost technology can give rise to a complex system of a relationship between the sensor and the human. Google's experiments with the TensorFlow Lite open source library focus on the low computer power hardware to track the human behaviors show a specific direction in the integrate the AI in everyday things. A mature scenario is opened in which the designer and the developer will teach to the machine to interpret the human gesture and can transform this learning process into a product really for the market.
So we have the role played by the artificial intelligence and you know what Michele said in the interaction, but we have another key role that emerged by our studies, and we have today a use case on that. It is emotion. So emotion, of course, it's a kind of area which has been investigated by technological development, by the analysis of the human behavior since a long time. But recently, technologies aimed at tracking the emotion has been grown, let's say, if not exponentially, at least geometrically. So that means that we are now facing a new experience in the use of these technologies. Many years ago was published a book, which is famous also for the label that introduced, that was titled, as you know, Affective Computing. And the idea was to have a kind of relationship between the computing and the technologies and the emotional tracking. Of course, the emotion are important because can help us. I mean, the tracking and the understanding of the emotion are useful and important because helping us to understand something more about the user status. Most of the traditional, let's call this traditional, but let's say most of the traditional research in understanding the user's, status and role are based on the detection of the cognitive status, like workload, attentional distribution, and whatever. But we have seen, since a long time that the emotion play a big role in combining with element like, workload or, attention distribution or whatever. So this kind of combination are very relevant, and it's important for, make the interaction technologies not only even more aware in respect to the user status, but also able to adapt themselves in the combination of these elements in making the understanding of the humans even and the body, of course, even more relevant. And by the way, we have today a specific project dedicated to this with the Italian spin-off SME, which is called Emoji.
Another theme is the new capacitive material. The last 20 years of interface development has been characterized by the continuing research to achieve a precise construction of the screen of our devices, more and more defined and accurate in the tracing of the touch on their surface. The rigid and the planar configuration is a limit. Other technology has tried to break this issue with the introduction of flexible screen in the market, but however, the morphological limit of the form remain the point of crisis of this project, and also having the design integrate part of the screen on the non-screen surface with a capacitive sensor, but the digital shift between the real touch experience and this mediated interaction is very partial and limited. Recent projects, including the case study presented in the symposium by company TG0, show us a new frontier of tactile interaction, which will lead us to a way to develop a new interactive system with, that will connect the human and the machine through a deep control of the link between the body and the artifact.
And together with the new surface, of course, we have another point which is very relevant for today and for discussion about the body, which is the touch. The touch in the interface designer, let's say, experience, you know, typically play a kind of tactical role. So it, you know, when we are understanding or we try to understand and guide something with the tactile experience, with the touch, we don't have as a design the same, let's say, semantic ground that we have with the visual channel. So tactile information, you know, feedback given by the vibration or whatever seems to not give the same detail of the information given, you know, by auditory or even more by visual. But from the other side, tactile has a key role, as I said, a tactical role, because they would help us to create effective multimodal interactions. I mean, interaction in which visual, acoustic, and other are combined by this sense, which help us to make things even more understandable and even more aware, and people, of course, even more aware, especially in multitasking condition, where we have to make more things than just interacting with technologies, and we can use the tactile experience as a key role. So their role is the role of the feedback, but also the role of guiding the experience. And the relationship between the feedback and the guiding experience is offered by the so-called haptic, let's say, interaction modality, which is a kind of active tactile. The challenge is make haptic channel, so active tactile channel, even more, let's say, active and reconfigurable. That means able to help us to understand visual, to understand acoustic, to move in the environment, perceiving digitally the sense of the touch, the sense of the physical, let's say, interaction. And we have on that two key projects. And we are very glad to have them here today as the others. One is Ultralip and the other one is Tesla Suite. Ultralip is working with the haptic technologies, with the contactless technology, which give us the perception of the touch in the space. Why Tesla Suite has designed and implemented the suite with as, let's say, equipped with the tactile and sensomotorial responses, which give, and they are, of course, programmable and, let's say, actionable, that give us an even more physical experience of an immersive scenario. So both are promoting an even more concrete, even in the digital world, a more concrete experience in the immersive visual, let's say, virtual internet.
If the visualization we are looking for to materialize a feedback to sustain the illusion of interaction, in the real world, the COVID-19 pandemic confronted us with a sense of the body as a shape of a new normality. The shifting of the interactive experience into a video framework, moving from the 3-dimension to 2-dimension of the screen, that for many of us seemed to be acceptable during this last year. However, a critical reflection on the limitation of the perceptive process of the totality of the body emerges. The most invisible part of the flow of the communication, in which a level of empathic emotion messages is often erased by the digital tool that we use to connect each other. Most invisible part of the flow of the communication are lacking, and the result is a problem with the fundamental part of the body language that reduce the physical component associated to the voice, to the sound of our voice. The absence of the body become limited in the transfer of emotion among the human in the relationship. Also, if we think about the arts field, the thing is more tragic. We cannot feel art in digital mediation. It's a very big problem. Try to imagine difference between a real and virtual museum visit or a streaming of the artist concert and the difference between the artist performance in live situation. We need to experiment. It's necessary to experiment in this field. The new form of restitution of the emotion process, we decided to invite to this symposium the Arte Balletto Foundation with very recent project that investigate how to don't lose people emotion while looking at the dance choreography with a fully virtual environment. In front, a complete dematerialization of the dance physical movement.
So most of the technologies are aimed at promoting new experience or, promoting changing in behavior. And the behavior is a key point of our research in today's symposium. Behavior is something that we sometimes want to keep and sometimes want to change. But at least it's known from the human studies that the changing of behavior is a complex and sometimes, let's say, not effective task. Unless, as some researchers said, you don't find a kind of pathways, a facilitator, which help you to change your behavior, moving within a kind of channels from one type of behavior that you want to lose and another one which is expected to be more, let's say, convenient or more effective or more healthy. So in the world in which we are expecting to promote the quality of our behavior, the assistive technology would help us in supporting this kind of change. Interfaces and many media could promote this virtual behavioral change. Even not all of them are, using only one channel or, the typical approach, but they are combining elements as you are going to see today. And even more, as you will see how this kind of change will be promoted by new channels, by new facilitators that would help using a combination between physical and perceptive solicitation, suggestion, promotion, this kind of transformation.
technology help us to understand and we can involve in transformative process and now a mature factor in the replacement of a missing or deficient part of the bodies. As addressed several times, the theme of the prosthetic as acquired maturity, increasingly and faithful rendering of the human body and the element of the nature. Functionality, fruition, and replacement are giving way a path centered on the process of the sensory transduction, in which the lack of one sense is transferred to another, but the use of a technology that commutate a signal in different representation of the sense. From Cyborg and Erbison first experiment at the beginning of the centuries, which tried to compensate the lack of a part of his chromatic spectrum of the vision, to the recent research of the neosensory that we present today at the symposium. This scenario shows a potentially that lead us to imagine a design mutation of a perceptive possibility toward an increasingly hybrid sensorial communication.
So we have seen what we have done so far. You are going to see, or at least what we have investigated so far, we are going to see the great experience that our colleagues will show you in, let's say, digital real condition very, very soon. But what happened in the future? What we have done together has been to create a kind of permanent observatory on the role of the human body interaction, a kind of, let's say, community of practitioner, researcher, projects, initiative, which put together, you know, in a great completeness and in a kind of continuous updating the debate on this topic. So the Advanced Design Unit, which is, of course, the scientific mind behind this organization, is taking the role to being the promoter and the maintainer of this permanent observatory, of this research service, let's say, that intends, once again, to create a community of people, but also the occasion, let me say, to understand, you know, the evolution of the human body interaction. So we are open to promote future experience, to make next action during the autumn and during the 2021, and try to create this community of people even greater and even more active. So thanks to be here, and the role to complete to Michele.
Okay, we try to make the conclusion. We are at the beginning of the process to understand the new relationship between the design and body, which has been approached according to the logic of the product of the market, but which is now changes toward the dimension of the design for well-being of the individual person or a people community. This relation between the individual and the people community. The second design direction that we have highlighted, discovering only a few parts between the three macro areas, Homo faber, s.r.l, and cogitans, which have set up to investigate. The evidence of the case analyzed show us that it is now necessary open a structured multidisciplinary debate on these themes, which until now may only be analyzed about the emerging technology and the potential of the construction of the artifact and service. But now they could open a new age of transformative artifact for women and men and their bodies.